The Red Gold and Bold podcast is back with you here. If you're catching us via the podcast, remember you can catch us live. We're streaming live Tuesday nights, usually at 9:30. Going a little bit early today because of some other business that has to be attended to. With you as always, Jeff Chadiha from the NFL Network and NFL.com. Sam McDowell from the Kansas City Star. My name is Soren Petro from Sports Radio 810 WHB. More free agent news since we last spoke with you. The return of Charles Omenihu, $1 for $7 million. Was this the right deal for the Chiefs? Omenihu, we surprised that he's back. Mike Pennel returns. I don't think anybody's surprised about that one. How does this defensive line look overall right now? Does this mean that they don't have to go D-line with that first-round draft pick? Nick Bolton says it wasn't about money. Hollywood Brown says he has unfinished business. What grade do we give the Chiefs for this offseason so far? And which departing player that has already left the Chiefs is going to be the most difficult to replace? We're talking about it right now here on the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast.
You are listening to the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast, the most in-depth analysis of the Kansas City Chiefs on planet Earth, breaking down the Chiefs like no one else can. Red, Gold, and Bold is hosted by Jeff Chadiha, Sam McDowell, and Soren Petro. Jeff Chadiha is a senior columnist and on-air personality for the NFL Network and NFL.com. Sam McDowell is a columnist for the Kansas City Star. Soren Petro is the afternoon drive host of the program on Sports Radio 810 WHB in Kansas City. The Red, Gold, and Bold podcast is proudly brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor, making parking lot problems disappear in Kansas City since 1994. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, and every project comes with a written warranty. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, one contractor, all things parking lot. Now, here are the hosts of the Best Chiefs podcast, Jeff Chadiha, Sam McDowell, and Soren Petro.
All right, thank you very much, Curtis. We do appreciate it. Off and running here, boys, on a Tuesday edition of the Red, Gold, and Bold. They're getting the band back together on the defensive line. Sam, let's start with you. Charles Omenihu, $1 for $7 million. Are you surprised that he couldn't get more out there? Who got the better end of this deal? Was it the Chiefs getting him back, or was it Omenihu getting $7 million over 1 year?
Well, I always thought that the Chiefs should let him test free agency, and then if the market returned to the Chiefs, then sign him. And that's pretty much what happened, is that Charles Omenihu tested the market because of his performance last year, his injury the year before, his suspension the year before. I mean, those are three question marks about Charles Omenihu at the long term. But it also makes sense for the player, I think, to sign a short-term deal and then try to reestablish his market. He's an older player compared to the guy I'm going to compare him to, but Tershawn Wharton did this a year ago too. I mean, he was coming off of an ACL injury, did not have a great year 2 years ago, and so he signed a one-year deal to try and reset his market. Now he's getting paid $45 million over 3 years in Carolina. The reality is that when Charles Omenihu returned, he didn't play great football for the Chiefs. His pressure rate was 7.6%. He only had 2 quick pressures, those under 3-second pressures after returning. He didn't have great numbers. There's not great analytics behind the performance that he had over those final 7 games. But he knows the Chiefs system. He knows Spag's system. He's a body that obviously fits what Steve Spagnuolo likes to do. He's capable of playing inside and outside. So I've got no problem with this at all for the Chiefs. And like I said, I think for the player, it makes sense to try and maybe cash in a year from now, even though he becomes a year older in the process.
Jeff, how do you view this one?
Much like Sam, I thought the Chiefs got a nice deal here because they need depth, and it's a player they know, player they trust, and can use in different ways. For Omenihu, I was never as high on Omenihu coming back as a lot of people were. And I know that he did some good things the year before, but I think so much of this defensive line success, some of the other guys depend on Chris Jones to eat. And so when Chris Jones is playing at a high level, they look better. And when he's not, they don't look as good. And so there are a lot of teams out there who needed pass rush help. Detroit Lions, the Green Bay Packers, The Chargers re-signed Khalil Mack. The Buffalo Bills signed Joey Bosa, who's been banged up forever. And so there are a lot of opportunities for him to make money out there. So to me, it says a lot. He should pay attention to what happened this offseason as far as his market. And I know he was hurt. I know the numbers didn't back up what he wanted to do out in the market. But I also think that he's not as great a player as he thinks. And so being in a place that knows how to use him is a good thing for him.
Yeah, I listen. 1 year, $7 million sounds about right. It sounds a little rich. I'll be honest with you. To me, like if you let him, I like what Sam said. They did let him test the market. You know what the market said? We're not giving you multiple years. I've heard some people think, well, there was probably multiple year deals out there. Then he would have taken it, right? Like this is the National Football League, guys. And the steroid era of football never really got going like baseball, where guys could play at a high level at 37, 38 years old. Like he's ending his prime days. Like he's about ready to be at an age where he can't get anything but a 1 year deal. This isn't, a perennial Pro Bowler year after year after year. This isn't Myles Garrett hitting 30 years old. I think if there were multiple years out there, he would have grabbed it. And I think, Sam's right. The market told him, you're coming off a knee injury, and what have you really done? You've been a solid player. At times you flash and make some big plays, but week in, week out, year after year, no, not a difference maker. And so I think it's a win-win. I think it's a win more for the Chiefs because I think they can get more out of him than maybe anybody else. I think the Niners got good production out of him, but they were ready to walk. And I think the Chiefs, he fits what they do. And so I think he ought to be a little bit thankful. I think $7 million. Listen, it's not breaking the bank. I don't think they made a mistake, but I don't know if they had to give $7 million.
There's incentives in the deal, so it's up to $7 million. Right. He'll have to earn it to get to $7.
Okay, well that's a good point. Yeah, all right. So I was thinking 7+, but yeah, up to 7. But still, I think I think it's a good signing for the Chiefs, more so than it is for him. But I think it speaks to what the market thought of him. And I think you do hope the Tershawn Wharton comp is what you're hoping for, that we didn't see the best of him. You mentioned the numbers weren't as great as they were last year, where he really made a difference. And so you hope that there's another gear for him to get to. And, they need defensive linemen. Let's be honest. I mean, I think this does, at least give them some depth. I don't think it's a steal for the Chiefs, but I think they needed him. He needed a job, and now you kick the can down the road. But do you think if he has a big year, he's not going to get the same kind of numbers that Tershawn Wharton's getting?
No, he's going to be too old for that. But I think one of the things is this is not just a Charles Omenihu thing. We've seen the high caliber younger edge rushers get paid, but there's a lot of Charles Omenihu types that are still out there 2 weeks into this free agency. There's also a lot of the Chiefs had success signing some of the veterans for 1 year or for half a year, even they get Melvin Ingram at the end of a year. They get Suggs at the end of a year. They've had some success with just, those stopgap types of players. There are all sorts of those guys still on the market at edge rusher, including like Von Miller's, Darius Smith, Matthew Judon, Agba, who played here. I mean, this is like these 30-plus-year-old guys on the edge. We haven't seen a market develop for them the way that the Bills tried to create a market for them a couple of years ago with Von Miller.
Yeah, I think this is a much smarter deal, right? I think way smarter deal, and this is where the Chiefs are. They gave him the opportunity, and look, if somebody wants to give you a 3-year deal, go with our blessing. We understand there's a limited time to make this money. Go with our blessing. Obviously, no one was. So they bring him back. He adds the defensive line, and I think they're a better football team today than they were before he got back. And I think you do hope for him to be better this year than he was last year and return to kind of the form he had a couple of years ago. But he needs to play 16-plus games, to get any deal bigger than this ever again in his football career. Mike Pennel returns. Jeff, I like Mike Pennel. I think Mike Pennel serves a purpose. And I'm happy to see Mike Pennel back. I know Sam loves him in the locker room. Your go-to quote, is that what you called him, Sam?
Mike Pennel.
Mike Pennel, yes.
I do like Mike Pennel. Yeah. He's not always eager to talk to media, but I think Mike Pennell's a super smart guy. I like talking to him.
I do too.
Is he more loquacious than Nick Bolton and Joe Tooney? Is he in that category?
He does.
He's good when he wants to be, for sure.
Yeah. He did the analytics conference, the one that, when Eric Eager got his job at the Panthers and had to step away. He was one of a couple of guys they used to help fill in for Eric, and he did a great job. I mean, I did enjoy him, and he was in his element talking with academia, sitting up there and spouting around numbers and everything. He didn't dive deep into the numbers, but just his football insights were very good. So I do like him. He's a big man that, is a run plugger. And I think you need one of those guys. And Jeff, I think having him back and a guy that knows the system, he's depth. Hopefully he's not a starter, right? Nothing against him, but I think you hope that you find somebody that can either start over him immediately or move him out fairly quickly. But this gives them the depth and lessens the need to have to go get a defensive lineman in the first round.
Oh, no question. I don't have a problem with Mike Pennel being back. Like you said, he serves a very specific need. I think that need clearly has more value in today's game than it did when he first showed up, because teams run the ball more. And you're in a division now where you're going to face the Raiders are going to run the football now with Pete Carroll there. So you got every team in this league in this division is going to be more ground oriented, and the Bills are running it more. The Ravens are running it more. I mean, so most teams you're going to face either in your own division or in the conference playoffs are going to be physical. And so Mike Pennel certainly has a role here. And so he's cheap. He's probably feels like he's like 40 years old now. I think he's getting up there. But yeah, he has value. I don't have a problem with that at all.
Yeah. How does the D-line look overall, Sam, right now?
Very, very similar to last year, which means they really still need help. But, this is the number one position, I think, where they can get help in the draft. Like to your point, Soren, they've at least put themselves where they don't have to take a first-round defensive lineman. I still think that's what likely makes the most sense, but they've set themselves up to where it's not a necessity, because Omenihu is an extra, body on your third down pass rush. Obviously, he can play more than that, but I'm saying that's an obvious role that he fills. And Mike Pennel is a run stuffer. There was at one time last year, so Pro Football Focus occasionally monthly would post the double team rates on running plays. And, 2 months into the season, Mike Pennel was like the 12th most double team defensive lineman on running plays last year. I almost felt like the Chiefs should have had some tells on whether or not it was a run or pass, whether or not Chris Jones is being double teamed on the play or Mike Pennel is being double teamed on the play. Like, he had that sort of effect on the running game, at least in the eyes of other teams, to where they thought, we got to get this guy because he's who could disrupt the running play. And we probably didn't talk enough about the fact that that's what improved most defensively with the Chiefs last year, is they finally were able to have some success in stopping the run. Mike Pennel was a huge part of that. So you fill that need. You've got, like I said, the Omenihu, to where I still think it's their most glaring, spot to address in the draft, but it's not quite the necessity that I thought it was maybe a week or so ago.
They do a lot of 1-year deals, says Terry.
Is that a bad thing?
There's a reason for that.
Not with the players that
they got a lot of money.
Brad says all this does is let them draft the best players, which I don't like that all this does. It allows them to do it, which I think is a positive. If he meant that with a negative spin, I don't think it's a negative. I think it's a positive. Pennel is a big time space eater. Seems far better than Noddy. I agree with that one wholeheartedly. I think they got it right there. Run stuffer, yes. I will say to that double team stat that you gave there, Sam, that no offense, but not to drag a guy in who we weren't talking about, but if you double team Mike Pennel when Chris Jones is on the field, what does that tell you about how you feel about blocking Chris Jones one-on-one when it's a run? I mean,
that's a major part of it. Is you think Mike Pennel is much more disruptive to the running game. You're right by that, by the way, if you're the opposing team.
Yes, but that is an issue, and that speaks to Chris Jones is there to try to get sacks, and that's why you need Mike Pennel, because Mike Pennel will do the dirty work. We'll stay home. We'll take on blockers. We'll do what it takes to stop the run. And it's one of the reasons why I think you need Mike Pennel. If you're going to have Chris Jones, you need a Mike Pennel out there with them. And so the Chiefs have that now. And I think that's an important part of the equation. And so they get Omenihu. They put Pennel back. It does look a lot like last year's defensive line, just a year older, right? Like Mike Pennel's deeper into the 30s. Battled some injuries last year, more likely. I like having him back. But I do think for him to be at his best, he needs to be used less, right? If you're going to keep Mike Pennel healthy throughout the course of the year. Chris Jones has got a 3 in front of his age as this year gets going. I think that is one of the things Sam said it looks a lot like last year's defensive line. How much worse do you get year over year when you just get a year older in the NFL?
Oh, look, it's not. It doesn't just look like last year's defensive line. It is last year's defensive line. I mean, the only guy who's not here now is Derek Nottie, right? Which is addition by subtraction. But look, I'm fine with these moves because they are to Terry's point, that they are in a position financially. You can't go out there and just get whatever you want, and you're trying to find ways to backfill your roster. You need to have guys who can play. You want guys who know your system and who are veterans. But yeah, I'll be more excited about this group when you know, okay, there is some young guys in it who are coming up who can do some damage. And I don't mean to always reference what the Eagles do with their defensive line, but they got a lot of young guys, and you look at their defensive line and you're like, oh my God. Like, now, granted, they've had some good circumstances lead to those selections, but they had a kid, Jalix Hunt, who was playing for them in the Super Bowl with a third-round pick out of Houston, Baptist, something like that last year. And he was productive for them. And so I still think that they need to find an edge rusher or a pass rushing defensive tackle, somebody who can be disruptive on the defensive line, because what Omenihu being back here tells me is that FAU is got to be on the outs. It's got to be, make or break season for him, because the guys who were here, Pennel, Omenihu, Karlaftis, like where does he slot in to start having his breakout year? Like, it just seems like they missed on that one. They got to find somebody else to come here and be a young, rising talent for this defensive line to really take off, because it's still built around Chris Jones dominating.
Does this mean that they don't, or does this at least push them one way or the other versus, Omenihu and Pennel? I'm not just talking about Pennel, but adding them, does it push them towards D tackle? I know there are a couple of people said, well, left tackle is the number one need. I get that, but we've covered a number of times that we don't think that, number one, there may not even be a legit starting left tackle anywhere in the first round this year. There were 7 guys, Sam has pointed out, that the Chiefs had graded as first-round picks last year. But so you can want a left tackle, but are you going to take a guy who, last year would have been a third-rounder in the first round just because that's the top left tackle out there and no one thinks he can actually play left tackle? The answer is no. This we've covered it before. This draft is deep in defensive linemen. We would all agree that it looks just like last year's defensive line, but older. That's not better, okay, in my opinion. That's the same. That's slightly worse, right? I don't know how much more ceiling is left on George Karlaftis. I think we're starting to feel like after a couple of years we know what he is. After 2 years, Felix Anudike-Uzomah is a bust. I'm now ready to call it. I hope he proves me wrong, but there's nothing. First-round draft picks, what do you think you're going to get after 2 years of not being able to crack the rotation when guys like, Charles Omenihu go down? Like, let's stop like that. He's going to come riding in on a white horse and save the day. The defensive line's a little bit worse. My question to you, Jeff, is Omenihu and Mike Pennel push them towards defensive end, push them towards defensive tackle? If they go need, which one of those spots is more of a need?
Well, I think there's flexibility there. I think it's edge. I feel like you're going to have a tougher time finding those kinds of players in any draft who can be impact performers. See the guy that they took in the first round of this draft. And so there are some guys who have that kind of length, that kind of size that Steve Spagnuolo loves to have within his defensive line. And he loves to mix and match players. So I just don't know if a really dominant, like a Kenneth Grant type player from Michigan who's like 6'4", 330 pounds, more of a run stuffing guy who's really freakishly athletic, who might be a decent pass rusher, could help you. I'm leaning more towards somebody who can be more disruptive in the pass game. So that tells me edge is where you go.
Where do you sit, Sam? Like, if they had a preference, the draft may dictate. I think we all agree that they're in a position that they can lean a little bit more towards best available player. And if it's a great D tackle that's sitting there, they don't have to reach for an edge. But if they had one over the other, which way do you think they'd go?
Yeah, I agree with Jeff. It's an edge, but I think the one thing that is sort of lost in this conversation is the focus on just this year. I mean, Karlaftis is entering the last year of his rookie deal if they don't pick up his 5th-year option, which would be very expensive. Chris Jones, like you mentioned, is entering his 30s. Like, you need to not just be drafting to fill a need this year. You need to be drafting saying, what does this defensive line look like in 2026? Like, you've got to get guys who are cost-controlled players on what Brett Veach has long publicly said is a priority, is the offensive line and defensive line. You're getting to where you don't have cost-controlled players on either side. And so once Karlaftis' rookie deal expires, like you look at their offensive defensive line, the players that they have on there under long-term, it's Trey Smith, who's going to be the most expensive guard in the league. Creed Humphreys, the most expensive center in the league. They don't have an answer at left tackle. We're waiting to see if Kingsley Suamataia can be a cost-controlled player at left guard. Juwan Taylor's probably gone after this year. And then I just mentioned the defensive line. Like, you've got to get some cost-controlled talent on the places that you prioritize.
Yeah, I think there's no doubt. And I think it's still a likely spot wherever it is. And multiple ones in those first 4 picks in rounds 1, 2, and the 2 picks in round 3. Let's hear from our friends at Gann Asphalt and Concrete and Whataburger. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, proudly serving the greater Kansas City area. Nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor. Locally owned and making parking lot problems disappear in Kansas City since 1994. Let Gann educate you about the most cost-effective way to solve your parking lot problems. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews. Every project comes with a written warning. Gann Asphalt keeps your parking lot safer and helps you and your business avoid unnecessary delays and costly expenses. Find Gann online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete. One contractor, all things parking lot. At Whataburger, the flavor you've been asking for is back. For a limited time, check out the chicken fajita tacos or grab the Monterey Melt with all those same great flavors you've been missing. Also, for a limited time, check out the all-new Mexican hot chocolate coffee. Or you can try the Mexican hot chocolate shake. That's right, sweet, rich cocoa, warm Mexican cinnamon, notes of brown sugar, and a light kick of chili, swirled in a creamy blend of vanilla ice cream. And don't forget, you can get all your Whataburger favorites and more by downloading the Whataburger app with the QR code. Whataburger, proud sponsor of the Red, Gold, and Bold. All right, let's talk about Nick Bolton being back with the Kansas City Chiefs. He says it wasn't about the money, Jeff. Once the Chiefs were interested, I don't know if that's like, hey, I could have got more, or like 3 for $45 is not a bad deal. And to me, it's more than I thought the Chiefs would go to keep him in a Chiefs uniform.
Well, it's always about the money, first of all. And they obviously made him enough of an offer to where he said, I don't want to go out there and look around for more. We've had this conversation several times leading up to him re-signing that, what would it take? What would he get in the open market? He probably would have gotten about what the Chiefs gave him, maybe a little bit more. Zach Bond got, $17 million a year average annual salary. So he was in that ballpark, but this is a good deal for Nick Bolton and a smart play by him to understand, like, why go out and try to get a little bit more money to say you're the highest paid linebacker in that group, top 5, whatever it is, when Spagnuolo is begging you to stay, the linebackers coach begging you to stay, Andy's begging you to stay, Brett Veach is begging you to stay. And he strikes me as the kind of guy who understands his limitations, and that going into a different system, being a super highly paid guy, you can get in trouble real fast because people expect you to be like a Roquan Smith or like a Zach Bond. And being here and people know he's not the greatest pass defender in the world, but the things he does do well, he does at a high level for this team. So I give him a ton of credit for recognizing that the money was good enough for him to stay. He didn't have to go chase more if it's elsewhere.
I think there's a couple of things here. One, the 3-year deal I think is good for the Chiefs. But I think it's also good for him because he's going to be 28 when he gets out there. So he can still probably get another multi-year deal. Middle linebacker can age pretty well in this league. But I would have told you that it would have been 3 for 16 or 17 million per, 15 to 17 million per, going someplace else, or maybe even 4 with the throwaway, going to a team that was bad and needed a culture setter and somebody to thump in the run and get the crowd kind of fired up. And I am surprised at the amount, right? He says it's not about the money, but I think the Chiefs did him pretty solid. Like, I don't know how much more do you think he could have gotten, Sam, if at all, or is that just the way, just a comment he wants to make that he loves the Chiefs just to play into the Chiefs fan base?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not convinced he could have gotten more on the open market. I think some teams view him as a 2-down, not a 3-down linebacker on the open market, somebody who'd take off the field on third downs and dime package situations. But to me, because Nick Bolton talked to the media last week, and to me, the most interesting thing was what he said about a year earlier, which was that the Chiefs didn't really want to enter contract negotiations with him before last season because they told him, we need to see that you can make it through a full season healthy. And Nick Bolton was fine with that too, because he doesn't want to negotiate after coming off a year in which he only played 8 games. And by the way, the 8 games that he did play in 2023, he was playing hurt during a lot of those games too. So he certainly doesn't want to enact these conversations at a time when he's coming off, a buyer's market in that sense for him. So I think a lot of times when these deals are made, we question the timing of them, or why didn't they happen sooner? With Trey Smith, with Nick Bolton, that sort of thing. Nick Bolton gave us some insight for why a deal like that and conversations like that don't happen sooner. And there's no doubt he got paid more now than what he would have a year earlier. But the doubt is whether or not he could have gotten paid more by somebody else. And I don't think he could have. I think, like you mentioned, Soren, maybe he gets that dummy year of the 4th year attached, because this is kind of a dummy 3rd year as well, to where he could be entering free agency again at 27, really, if the Chiefs don't like what they've gotten. And the way the Chiefs don't like what they've gotten is the question mark I just mentioned, if his health doesn't hold up over these next couple of years.
Yeah, I listen, I'm the biggest Nick Bolton fan around. I went to war with Eric Eager a number of times. He called him Tracy Simeon, right?
Yeah.
I think he's better than Tracy Simeon by far. And I think there's a lot of intangibles that come there. And I think that's got to be part of it, to go to the price they went to, Jeff, is like, I don't know, how much is a player? How much value is there that we don't see on the football field? Like, how much can possibly be there?
Oh yeah, no, he's a big part of their culture. There's no question about that. And obviously a huge part of their success on the field and what Steve Spagnuolo wants to do defensively, the idea you have to bring somebody else in or even ask Drew Tranquil to move over to that spot. You would be downgrading the middle of your defense. You would be downgrading the communication, be downgrading the leadership. So I totally understand that. But there's also part of me that feels like timing was really good for him, and that it's apparent they came into this offseason with the mindset of, we're not going to be huge players in the market. And so let's focus on the guys we have here. However much you want to buy into the idea they're really going to make a big pitch for Ronnie Stanley, maybe that not happening, open up the reality of, hey, let's spend a little bit more money to keep this guy here. It's not, I don't think it was as simple as, we got to have Nick Bolton and we're going to throw down 3 for $45 to keep him. I think that there were some things that played out that made that an easier decision for them to make.
Sam, we have to turn to you to talk about Hollywood Brown. He says he has unfinished business. I mean,
did he start it? When the business start.
Yeah, like I don't know, just overall reaction to the comment.
Well, I mean, look, his agents know what the market was before him. I know he signed before that the market officially opened. His agents have a good idea of what the market was going to bring. That's what you do at the combine. We all know that this doesn't start once the legal tampering period starts, but I do think he could have gotten more on the open market. I don't think it would be significantly more. I think it'd be marginally more. But to me, Hollywood Brown lived through a training camp, and I don't mean the on-field performance. I mean, he learned that the Chiefs were going to make him a major part of their offense last year. And to me, that's the feeling that hasn't left Hollywood Brown, is he feels really valued by a good team and felt like he was going to put up good numbers because of his role within that offense on a good team. I think he looks at this similarly and says, Rashee Rice could be suspended. Xavier Worthy was great at the end of last season. We haven't seen him put together for a full year. And who else are they going to go to at wide receiver? And then you get a year older of Travis Kelce. I think he looks at the combination of opportunity, the quarterback he's playing with, like I said, the role that he was going to fill last year in the offense, and feels like it's a pretty good situation for him.
I think that's a lot of faith to think. Like, how much more do you think was out there?
I said marginally so. I literally said
I'm not trying to
not significantly, marginally so. Yes.
I'm just looking at the biggest wide receiver contracts that were given in free agency. Stephon Diggs, 3 for $69.
That was crazy.
Cup, 3 for $45, which I think is a little pricey. I'll be honest with you.
A little.
Well, a lot. Yes, I'm with you. I think that will end up being a bad contract when it's all said and done. But I think is what did he get? I didn't dig into the contract. I was just
and I mentioned the Dyami Brown, on a previous podcast where he got $10 million guaranteed, and he's got 700 yards in 4 years for the Commanders.
Yeah. What did Josh Palmer get?
Yeah, there's another one.
I mean, I think he's in that Hollywood Brown range of.
Josh Palmer got 3 for $29.
Yeah.
Right. So that's about $10 million per.
15 guaranteed.
Darius Slayton 3 for $36. But Hollywood Brown does have the injury issue, right? Like we agree that that's part of the issue.
That's the issue. It's not part of the issue. It's
staying healthy or just the one last year.
Well, staying healthy. I mean, he's had an injury question all along. I mean, like he's never stayed healthy. So I think that. And how old is Hollywood Brown now? Hollywood Brown will be 28 years old.
He's 28.
They go to training camp. His birthday's in June, so he'll be 28 years old. So
Josh Palmer's 26. His best year is 4 touchdowns, 72 catches, 769 yards. Hollywood Brown has a higher ceiling, but Josh Palmer is more likely to be a consistent 17 game availability for you. I think the Chiefs are in a spot with their other 2 wide receivers to take a chance at wide receiver 3 as a guy that potentially has a higher ceiling. But that everything you said about that market proves my point that I think Hollywood Brown, at least marginally so, could have gotten better than what the Chiefs gave him.
Okay. I'm fine with that. I do think, it's a big year for him, right? He needs to produce because he'll be headed out. He'll be being signed for a 29-year-old season the following year. So unless he has a really, really big year, I mean, it can happen. As we mentioned, Cooper Kupp, he's got a lot of tread off that tire, and he got 3 for 45, so it can happen. But if it doesn't happen with Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, I don't know what team is going to be like, we got to get in on this, right? Like that's going to be a big question mark there. Like I think it'll be a tough sell to get back out there on the market. What do you expect from him this year, Sam?
I mean, I would say
let's say he's healthy for 14, 15.
Yeah, I was going to say 12 to 14 games. 550 yards, like 4 touchdowns, 550 yards, maybe 600 yards, somewhere around there. I think that's about 40 to 45 yards a game. And I think that's, if he plays 12, 13, 14 games, and I think those are reasonable expectations, knowing that, last year happened. It could be worse.
Yeah. I mean, I think the question you mentioned that because was it fair to say you've turned up your nose at Palmer? You've turned up your nose at Brown. Is that fair?
There's ceilings, yes.
Well, I mean, I'm just saying, you don't like those deals is what I'm getting at. I
like the Hollywood Brown deal better.
Okay.
Than those deals.
Those will be ones that you keep an eye on. And they need to keep a grade card. Would we have been better off going and paying more for guys that, yes, haven't been that productive, but have been healthier? Because if you feel like everybody's enhanced, what could those guys be with Patrick Mahomes? That's the question. And I think that's obviously what the teams that acquired those 2 guys are counting on, right? I think where did both of them go?
Where did Palmer go? Did he go to Buffalo?
He went to Buffalo, yeah.
Palmer went to Buffalo, and Brown went to Jacksonville.
But like last year, for example, the Bills signed Curtis Samuel to a very similar deal that they just signed Josh Palmer to. I think it was 3 for 25 with 16 guaranteed or something. I mean, he did nothing for Buffalo last year. This happens with wide receivers. Hollywood Brown, I totally recognize the injury thing. It's a real thing. It's why you got him at the discount you did. I think he has more upside than these other guys that we're listing.
Okay. And I think clearly so do the Chiefs. I think they agree with you wholeheartedly that that's going to happen. Let's take a break and hear from our friends at Gann Asphalt and Concrete. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, proudly serving the greater Kansas City area. Nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor. Locally owned and making parking lot problems disappear in Kansas City since 1994. Let Gann educate you about the most cost-effective way to solve your parking lot problems. With free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, and every project comes with a written warranty, GAN Asphalt keeps your parking lot safer and helps you and your business avoid unnecessary delays and costly expenses. Find GAN online at GANasphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. GAN Asphalt and Concrete. One contractor, all things parking lot. Unlock a premium dispensary experience at Key Cannabis. Visit one of their 14 key locations across Missouri for a huge selection of cannabis products and expert recommendations from Missouri's friendliest bud tenders. At Key Cannabis, you'll find award-winning cannabis, convenient online ordering with drive-through pickup and a loyalty program, plus so much more. Visit their Kansas City area locations in KC North, South Kansas City, and Belton. Open 7 days a week. And mention my name, Soren Petro, to your bud tender for 20% off your purchase. Key Cannabis, open for premium cannabis experiences. All right, let's start handing out some grades. What kind of grade you giving this offseason for the Chiefs, Jeff?
I'd give them like B minus. Like, I think they're maybe a B, depending on what happened with Trey Smith, how that contract ends up looking. But I think that they've had a solid, like an okay offseason. It wasn't spectacular and not a lot of splashy moves, but I like the way they approached it, which was let's find some good value. Let's put a lot of emphasis on keeping the guys we have. Let's try to find a way to move Joe Thuney. Like, they haven't fixed left tackle, so it can't be much higher than that. You can't try to go. It can't be a great offseason, but the moves they've made, I understand most of them, and getting Bolton back was big for them. So I like that.
Okay, Sam, how about you?
Yeah, I've got the same letter grade as Jeff. I've got B minus. I think you guys know where I am on the Nick Bolton deal, and just the thought of paying non-premium positions the way that they paid them this offseason. And the biggest question entering this offseason was, can you protect Patrick Mahomes? As we stand here on March 25th, that remains to me the biggest question about this team is, how are you going to protect Patrick Mahomes? I mean, let's not act like Jalen Moore is not a risk. He's a risk. And I think the Chiefs are backed into a corner having to take a risk at left tackle, but he is a risk. But the part I like is what we've talked about already, that I think they've set themselves up well for the draft. And this is an important draft for them, because the last 2 years, I think they've gotten some players, but not the same, role players down the later ends of the draft that they had in 22 in particular, and 21 too. I mean, some of these contract extensions we're talking about with Bolton, Humphrey, and Trey Smith are 21 draft guys too. So this is an important draft for them, and I think they've positioned themselves well to hit this draft class more so than they did the last year.
Yeah, I think I entered this going like, I want to find a way to get to a B plus, and I can't, right? And then I backed down to a B, but it can't be an A. You're not hitting premium positions. No. It can't be an A. All A's are taken off the board. And so it's like, okay, the ceiling's B plus. Can't go to B plus. I don't like that they're putting a bunch of money into positions that are not the premium positions. My problem on why I will go ahead and give a B and not a B minus is, where else could they have spent the money? Right? Yeah. You do have to spend X amount, in a salary cap world. And as I look through it, like, where, if you're not giving it to Trey Smith, do you want to give it to Milton Williams?
Trent McDuffie.
I mean, yeah, like, where are you going to hand out this? Well, I mean, yes, for the future. Is that what you're talking about? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you can roll money over. I mean, you can say you could not kick $60 million of Patrick Mahomes and Chris Jones money to next year and better position yourself a year from now.
And that is a fair point. And you would be better for a year from now. And listen, had they done that, I might give them an A.
Yeah.
Right. That might have gotten an A from me had they done that. Because I'm with you. I think the next wave, and I'm curious if the Rams will ever head this direction, but somebody is going to say, okay, we're going to eat it for a year or two, and we're going to flush our cap, and they're going to turn around and they're going to start front loading contracts. And I think that's the future, is the big cash teams front loading contracts so that they pay a big chunk of money up front. Forget about the signing bonus. They just do it in salary, right? And then all of a sudden the guy's cheap year after year after year, and there's not a big signing bonus there that you have to eat when you cut him. You just cut him and you walk away. And so if he's not good, Okay, fine. Like, I think that's the future, and that's the it's not even analytics, the obvious just accounting that could make a team a lot better if you would take advantage of when you're bad. I mean, I call it embracing the suck. I think that's what you got to do, right? At times, embrace the fact that, like, right now you suck, and say, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to take advantage of it. We're going to reset our cap, and we're going to get out there, and we're going to make sure that we are in a position where we can be, driving the train. If they had done that and said, okay, we're going to bring down our cap numbers in future years, and we're just going to live with what we have, I would say, okay, that's bold. This is not bold. This is like, we don't want to lose ground. And I think oftentimes when you lose ground, that's exactly what you do, because guys get older. So, I'll go a B.
Pat, sure.
Yeah. I'll go a B just because I'm not sure where else they could have spent the money. And if they're not willing to do what I think would be a drastic, and that's like not replace guys and just take all the hits now, have Travis Kelce's numbers come off after this year, keep Mahomes' number down, then to me, this is, I get it. Maybe I'm being off than giving him a B. I get what they're doing.
Soren, to underscore your original point on this, though, I think what we learned about the Chiefs this year is they didn't like this free agency class at all. And so that is a real thing. But, like I said, there is another option, which is you could sit it out and you could help yourself out for future years when you do have Trent McDuffie coming up.
And if they get Trent McDuffie signed, if they get George Karlaftis signed, and they walk away from somebody, they walk away from Juwan Taylor, and they found an answer at tackle, then we'll think differently of this, right? But if Jalen Moore can't make it go at left tackle, they need to walk on Juwan Taylor. They don't have the money for Trent McDuffie because the cornerback position is exploding, and he's not willing to sign because he wants to get to the market. Then this will look even worse at that time. Who is going to be the guy that they miss the most, Jeff, from the guys that have left?
Oh, Tooney. Tooney is I don't think there's even like a close second on this, just because, look, obviously he's an all-pro guard and he's been a big factor in their success. But to me, the left side of that line is, as Sam referenced, it's scary because you don't have an insurance policy now, and he, at the very least, he could be serviceable for you. He didn't have a great Super Bowl, but they could scheme it up and make it work, and now you just don't know who's out there. And so I don't know if their run game is going to be as good, and I certainly feel like their left tackle situation could be worse. And so that is, I think him being gone is a big deal.
Yeah. Sam, who are they going to miss the most?
Well, just for starters, I don't think their left tackle situation could possibly be worse than we saw last
year. You never say that.
It was that bad that I feel comfortable saying that, even if he's bad. Look, Joe Tooney's number one. But I do think the only part I would slightly push back on, I do think Justin Reed could potentially be a close second. I mean, he played 90% of the snaps last year. I looked up a couple weeks ago, and I'm gonna qualify this and say that some of the on-off differences with the player on and off the field can be tricky and not used properly. They're pretty staggering with Justin Reed on versus with him off the field. I mean, the amount of negative plays, the amount of explosive plays you allowed. I mean, even the EPA, the expected points added on a per play basis, it's a massive difference with him off the field. And just to give a small flavor of that, and he played 90% of the snaps, and the 10% he didn't play, the Chiefs allowed 80% completion percentage on those snaps. Like, their pass defense struggled without Justin Reed on the field. And that's not even really his best strength. So I think they're going to miss Justin Reed more than people are saying they're going to miss Justin Reed.
Yeah, I think it's really just those two, right? Are those the only two candidates? I think it's Joe Tooney.
Well, you know what's interesting?
Wharton,
I was going to say, to answer your question, the guy who got paid the most was Tershawn Wharton, was the guy who cashed in most. Obviously, that's an age thing as well, with them feeling like he's still growing.
Yeah, I that's a good point. I will say that I think they're going to find the answer for Tershawn Wharton in the draft. They better, right? But I think it's got to be Joe Tooney, because he did bail him out at left tackle. He is still a great pass blocking guard. They don't have the answer right now. They're going to try Kingsley Suamataia, like they have a guy they want to be the answer, but they don't have the answer right now. And, they're going to have a question mark at left tackle. So to me, yeah, that's the direction I'm looking is that Joe Tooney's going to be a tough nut to replace. I mean, there's no doubt about it. I agree with you, Justin Reed. They will miss, but I think Tooney's. I feel like Jaden Hicks will give them. Who are you more confident in? Jaden Hicks stepping in for Justin Reed, or Kingsley Suamataia stepping in for Joe Tooney?
Yeah, I mean that actually was I tried to come up with an argument for Justin Reed and going through the backups, and like you can't get there that he's a bigger absence than Joe Tooney. I just think he's a bigger absence than people are talking about, and I knew we'd all pick Tooney, right?
Yeah, but I do think the one thing I would say is there is Creed Humphrey next to whoever's going to play left guard. I know we don't know who it's going to be at left tackle, but at least Creed Humphrey helps. But I don't know that Brian Cook helps whoever's going to step in. I mean, Brian Cook may get exposed even more now that Justin Reed isn't out there. So I think
a lot on Jaden Hicks' shoulders for sure.
Yeah. I think it's legit. I think it's legit for sure. Speaking of legit, our great sponsors, by the way, hit that like button, the love button, the follow button, the subscribe button, whatever button you've got. You can always do it. Don't cost nothing. It helps us out. And, of course, you can always support our great sponsors like Gann Asphalt and Concrete, free consultations, no commissions, and in-house crew. Plus, every project comes with a written warranty. Gann Asphalt and Concrete. One contractor, all things parking lot. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com. Our friends at Key Cannabis. Mention my name, Soren Petro, to your bud tender. You can save 20% off your purchase. That's right. Use my name at Key Cannabis and save 20% off your purchase. And our friends at Whataburger. Remember, they're open 24 hours. Check out those chicken fajita tacos. They're absolutely my favorites. You can also grab the Monterey Melt, plus the Mexican hot chocolate shake. All wonderful, wonderful items, but I do love the chicken fajita tacos. Get them right now. They're open. If you are catching us live, you can get over there. Right now, they're open 24 hours serving breakfast, 11 p to 11 a. For Jeff Chadiha from the NFL Network, NFL.com, Sam McDowell from the Kansas City Star, my name is Soren Petro saying thank you very much for joining us here on the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast.